It won't be a long day. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Larry.
Yeah. Day 2 of Julius Caesar. Today's tragedy day. It's not the same as a tragic day. No, tragedy is a different thing. You may recall when we were talking about Measure for Measure, we were talking about it being a comedy. We talked about kind of the ways and formula for comedy. So today I'm going to kind of cart out the ways and formula of tragedy. Does that mean that Julius Caesar completely fits this form? Not entirely, but I think it's still a useful frame, and it's the tragedy for next year, and I think that like all these things, we're just sort of carting out different ways of viewing these plays and sort of seeing as you take an individual play and sort of see like what is helpful in terms of the march through stuff. So today we're going to really talk a lot about tragedy and how it is works in Julius Caesar. The next class we're going to do the old charting. You know, love that charting thing, and so be here for the multiple pens and colors and pieces and parts.
Yay.
Discussion of how we go through the plays. So I want to just start with a little bit of kind of recap. I'm going to stop looking at that stupid thing. Yeah, anybody ever do the weather on TV, local TV channels? You know that they're not really looking at anything. You know that whole thing. You have to kind of know where Washington State is. You know, you're kind of like, yeah, it's really kind of weird, but that's what I'm feeling like. I think this will show up somewhere. Like Lydia and Gina will figure out how to put it back in. You know, on the YouTube thing. So. But let's do a little bit of a recap of what, for those of you who weren't here last week and are just joining us, just a little bit of what we talked about, which was production history and sort of cultural context. So of the 5 things that sort of the big topics, one is we talked about Civil War being sort of a preoccupation in the 1590s in England, and there's sort of, you know, the pseudo second Spanish Armada threat of that was happening toward the late 1590s and how that probably was on everybody's mind. We talked about the nature of kingship, what it means to be a good king, and as we talked, there's a lot of the increasing conversation about who is going to take over when Elizabeth invariably dies, and you know by 1599 she's in her 60s, and there's something with high anxiety with no heir. So in some ways, you know, those issues of leadership, certainly with a lot of the history plays deal with, the English history plays deal with, right, which is 1590, seem to indicate to me kind of an anxiety with that sort of topic in general, which I think is kind of a fair assessment to sort of make. If we agree that plays respond to, you know, what's happening around. I mean, that this is our own personal response to daily events or global events or however many events you want to call them, and that somebody is choosing to put it in a formal context known as a play, or it could be a poem, it could be a song, blah, blah, blah. It's just that somebody is choosing to respond to daily life in a formal artistic gesture, such as a play, and I think that's true. I mean, I think plays are about something. I think they are responding to something, and there's no reason to believe that Shakespeare's plays were not responding to what was happening then. So there's been a host in the last 25 years of wanting to know more, well, probably longer than that, but this sort of new historicism angle in trying to know what actually was happening at the time in 15, you know, during Shakespeare's time, to sort of try to glean some things that it might actually have been addressing particularly. We talked a little bit about the notion of ancient Rome and Elizabethan England and how they sort of seemed aligned, that Elizabeth especially used sort of the pageantry and the glory that was Rome as part of the way that she identified herself and her reign. You know, it may be that we in America think more of sort of ancient Greece as the thing that we want to emulate or think has great value for those of us in the theater. Of course, we think because, you know, they had theater and everybody went, and so we think that makes it a great civilization. And so, of course, we want to emulate ancient Greece versus ancient Rome, where they had all those kind of reality shows, you know, like, right?
The lions.
You know, right, the lions and the Christians. That's about as reality as Survivor one could imagine, you know, right? So, you know, you don't kind of want to identify with that, but you really want to identify with the glory that was Greece. However, the glory that was Rome, it seemed to be the kind of thing that Elizabeth really, especially, we talked about pageantry and actually having garments that seemed to be reminiscent, and buildings. I mean, there still was, you know, all roads lead to Rome. I mean, there's still a lot about Rome and England in terms of architecture and structural things that they still would gravitate toward. We talked a lot about how the history, that in generic terms, is going from the end of Henry V, the last history play, until he'll do Henry VIII, which is in 1599, and how he writes Julius Caesar in the same year-ish. There's all this sort of internal evidence about, you know, where Julius Caesar fits itself from Henry V to Hamlet. I mean, there's that whole thing that Polonius talking about, I played Julius Caesar, blah, 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 which seems to indicate that Julius Caesar was before Hamlet, or sort of written around the same time. So we're going from Henry V into, you know, the Hamlet, the major, mature, tragic section, and so this is a really interesting thing that this is the one that's kind of paralleling us in, and so it's interesting to sort of talk about tragedy today because it's going to really become the genre of choice for the second half of his career.